Hey kids, I don't do this type of video ever for a couple of reasons. First, I'm pretty small time. No one is looking to Eric Miller to answer all of their burning questions. And honestly, I just want to do my own thing and let other people do their own thing. I saw the Garand Thumb Hi-Point Carbine video that came out this past week. And it bothered me. Now, it didn't bother me because I'm a big Hi-Point fanboy, which I'm not, but it did bother me for some other actually serious reasons. So what I'd like to do is go step by step through the video and discuss everything that happens. We're going to look at the problems Mr. Thumb says he's experiencing and examine what's actually happening. Now, before we get started, I will say a few things. First, I'm interested in fairness. Second, there are some criticisms coming for Mr. Thumb because some mistakes were made in this video. I am not here to drag him or put him down. I am also not here to champion all the wonders and virtues of the Hi-Point. I will do my best to be fair and honest. I strongly encourage all of you to go watch his video after you've watched mine and determine for yourself if you can see the same things that I am seeing. And the link to his video will be in the description. So this video is painful to watch. Problem number one is that the gun is not running very reliably. Now, I did not ask him for permission to use his video, so I am just going to use screenshots to show what is going on. So are these failures to feed a real problem? Yes, my Hi-Points were never good right out of the box. As I've discussed in other videos, they seem to require about 200 to 300 rounds to wear certain areas down in order to cycle smoothly, not to mention the need to polish the feed ramp. Now, when I first got my C9 way back when, I felt exactly like he did in this video. I was sad and angry and disappointed. Why isn't this thing working? It's supposed to work. It is very disheartening, but I kept shooting it, polished the feed ramp, tinkered with the mags a little bit, and one day it just started running great. And it's run great ever since for over 1,000 rounds. So the malfunctions Mr. Thumb is experiencing in this intro, as far as I can see, are failures to feed. This is a normal thing to see with new Hi-Points. I am not shocked or surprised by this. The break-in period for this gun is rough. Is that great that your brand new gun may or may not require some tinkering right out of the box? No, it's not great, and it's probably the thing I like the least about the Hi-Point platform. But if you're going to buy a Hi-Point, an initial low reliability is something you should expect, unfortunately. What I'm really surprised by is other gun tubers getting brand new Hi-Points and having them work flawlessly out of the box. James from TFB TV got a 10mm carbine and had zero malfunctions with it, and that's bizarre. I think the same is true of Demolition Ranch, and I think that was also a 10mm carbine. I just think that's weird. So about 6 minutes into the video, we get to problem number 2. He goes to fire 2 rounds. The first round ends in a stovepipe, but it does feed the second round. So stovepipes, or failures to eject, are not normal Hi-Point break-in problems. So this tells me that likely something non-normal is happening here. He clears the first round and fires the second round, and at 6:25 declares that the gun jammed. So what really happened here? We can see that the case is still in the chamber and that the extractor is holding the case flush against the breech face. The slide has also locked open as it should on the last round fired. So what happened here? And is the gun really jammed? If you're familiar with the way that a Hi-Point functions, this is a very easy problem to diagnose. The striker is broken. And I know this because number one, the gun stopped firing, and number two, cases are not ejecting. If you've seen my other video on how a Hi-Point works, you'll know that everything about this gun is designed around the ease of manufacture, and a lot of parts on this gun actually serve more than one purpose. What Mr. Thumb is unaware of at this time in the video is that the striker doubles as the ejector. So if it breaks, you will simultaneously experience 2 problems, because that part is pulling double duty. We can clearly see this phenomenon again at around 7:45 and actually through the rest of the video as he keeps trying to fire the gun with a broken striker. The extractor is holding the unfired rounds against the breech face, and he is having to push the rounds out from under the ejector to get them out of the gun. So let's talk a little bit about the striker. This is an odd but interesting design. The striker is very long and sticks out a very long ways past the breech face in order to kick spent casings out of the gun. This also means that a good bit of it could be broken off and it will still fire, though likely not very reliably. Since this long skinny part is put under a lot of stress, this is probably the only part of the gun that I would say you should expect to fail eventually. My C9, for example, has over 1,000 rounds through it, and I'm honestly surprised it hasn't broken yet. However, the big question here is, should you expect it to fail after only 100 rounds? The answer to that is absolutely not. The striker itself was clearly defective, and unless you have a spare one on hand, that's it, you're done for the day. He has every right to be frustrated and disappointed with that. Unfortunately, Mr. Thumb is not familiar enough with the gun to recognize this failure, which is a bit understandable since the Hi-Point does have some unusual features, like a striker ejector. At 8:41, we have problem number 3, where he says it's not extracting the round and he thinks that the extractor is broke. Now, I will forgive him if he meant to say ejecting the round, because the extractor is working just fine. But again, this tells us exactly what the problem is. The ejector/striker is broken, and there is no use continuing at this point. At 13:17, we have problem number 4. He points out that the front sight has broken and proceeds to twist it around the barrel. So what happened here? Let's take a look at how this front sight works. It is indexed onto the barrel by this rail here, but it is held in place by these 2 Allen screws. So did the front sight break, or did it break free? From what we can see in the video, it broke free. Either it got whacked hard against something, or the screws were loose and shooting the gun knocked it loose. The follow-up question here is this a bad design? And I believe that depends on your point of view. The front sight is specifically designed to be easily removed by the end user who wants to mount an optic to the gun, as I have. And honestly, I think in today's market, that will likely be a very large percentage of customers. The first thing I did when I got mine home and out of the box was take off the iron sights. The other side of that coin is, well, if I keep the iron sights on, shouldn't I expect it not to shake loose from shooting it? Now, that is a valid point. The only thing I can say about that is, if I was going to use the front sight, I mean, keep it on there, I would crank those screws on as hard as I could and blue Loctite it in place. The screws, not the front sight. Problem solved. I might even remove some of this barrel coating paint stuff so that the screws had a cleaner surface. So did his front sight break? As far as we can see in the video, no, it did not break. Do the screws need to be Loctited? Yes, they do. Around 14:10, we have problem number 5. He mentions that pulling in on the forward grip will flex the gun and move the point of aim. Now, I am sure that this is true. I haven't noticed it myself, as I am a massive weakling and Mr. Thumb is undoubtedly much stronger than I am. What is most likely happening is that the plastic stock is flexing. The metal parts that make up the inside of this gun are fairly minimal. So for the rest of the gun to flex some amount, that seems plausible. Anyway, in terms of accuracy, I don't have this on video, but once I got my $40 BSA red dot sighted in, from a rest, I was able to hit a 4 or 5 inch steel plate very easily from about 100 yards. It wasn't even that hard, which I was a little surprised at, as I'd always heard that these guns were barely usable at 100 yards. That is not true, and I wish I had video of it. Mr. Thumb describes the flexing he was seeing as the most terrifying aspect of the gun. My personal opinion is that that is a bit of an overstatement. Around 15:05, we have problem number 6, the charging handle. So yes, the charging handle that comes with the gun is awful and scrapes up your hands. Upgraded to the M-Carbo 1, it is super duper. But Mr. Thumb mentions that it has come loose. That is true. It does come loose. Again, this is the same situation we have with the front sight. It's just something that you need to put some blue Loctite on. So why is this a screw? Well, first I'm sure because of its ease of manufacture. There are other ways of making a removable charging handle, but this, I think you'll agree, is the simplest and easiest. So why does the charging handle need to be removable? Well, otherwise you won't be able to get the cover off of the gun. The obvious question here is, if I Loctite the handle into the gun, doesn't it mean that I can't disassemble the gun anymore? Good question. The answer is twofold. First, you blue Loctite it with just a little bit, so it should be easy to remove if you had to. Second, there's hardly ever a reason you need to disassemble it, since the gun doesn't require any disassembly for cleaning. Just cleaning patches down the barrel and wipe out the rest of the breech with your finger and you're done. 1524, we get to the trigger. This isn't really a problem or a failure that he experiences, but I want to mention it quickly anyway. Yes, the trigger is bad out of the box, but it actually is really easy to upgrade. A lighter spring from N-Carbo and a bit of polishing on the interface between the sear and the striker, and honestly, be careful with that. It just needs some smoothing out, not a super slick mirror finish, whatever. And honestly, with just those two things, this trigger is honestly good now. I'm shocked. I would even describe it as crisp. 10 minutes after we've noticed that the striker ejector is broken, he's still trying to get the gun to fire, and we see at 1614 that we are getting light strikes on the primer. As I said earlier, the striker is very long, and a lot of it can be broken off and still hit the primer, as we're seeing here. It is also finally at this point that Mr. Thumb realizes a broken firing pin must be the problem. As I said before, this is simply no good, and he has every right to be annoyed or upset with that. Around 1650, he starts a list of all the things that have broken so far. The striker ejector has broke, that is correct. But he goes on to say that the extractor has broke, which is not correct, and that the front sight is broke, which is also not exactly correct. However, the cringiest part of the video is at 1710, when Mr. Thumb discovers problem number 7. He engages the bolt hold open, but doesn't realize it. You can see very clearly when he engages it, and that it is in fact engaged when he says, "That's new," meaning the problem of the bolt staying open is a new problem he has not experienced before. He then smacks the gun around a bunch, unaware of what has happened, until eventually he knocks it free. He then mocks it as actually being a feature to prevent you from firing too many rounds, and then immediately goes on to accidentally engage it again. I mean, no disrespect. But the bolt hold open is actually a feature, and this problem that he was having, which he made a lot of fuss about, was solely due to an unfamiliarity with the gun and how it operates. Now, I understand that is a very heavy thing to throw out there, since Mr. Thumb is a more accomplished and experienced shooter and YouTuber than I will ever be. But allow me to explain. The magazine will engage a last round bolt hold open, but you can also lock the bolt open at any time by pushing the spinny thing here on the charging handle into this slot. That is literally how it is designed, and this type of bolt open is not unique to the Hi-Point. I used to have a .22 rifle that operated exactly the same way. So, is this something that is broken on the gun? No. You don't have to like the way that it's designed, but that is the way that it works. Problem number 7. Around 19 minutes, he mentions a piece of the Picatinny rail has snapped off. I don't doubt that. This gun has a lot of rails on it. That's great. But they're all plastic, which is less great. So no, I would not expect this to stand up to extremely rugged abuse. But for recreational use, sure. The last thing I want to discuss before wrapping this up is the point that Mr. Thumb kept coming back to, which was about using the gun for home defense. What do I think about that? Would I use my Hi-Points for home defense? Now, if I absolutely had to, sure, I would. But are they my first, or second, or third choice? No. But I say no for a different reason than Mr. Thumb does. My Hi-Points have been well broken in, and I find them to be reliable. I used my C9 in a number of practical shooting competitions, and the only problem I ever had with it were cheap reloaded ammo problems. The thing that does concern me is that striker could go at some unexpected time, and then boom, you are up a creek. Now, as Mr. Thumb said, yeah, firing pins break sometime. That is a thing that happens. But this one, as we know from the design, is a bit more likely to break than other firing pins. But to speak more broadly about this subject, I don't expect to be able to press every gun I own into a self-defense role. Can I use my Ruger standard pistol for self-defense? I mean, I guess, but I'd rather not. Can I use an SKS for home defense? Sure, but I'd rather use my VZ58. I look at Hi-Points as gun more for fun than for anything really. The pistols I don't find to be particularly fun to shoot, though I hear the 45s are kind of fun. But what I can say is the carbine is a total blast to shoot. I find it to be really, really fun. So what role would I put the Hi-Point carbine in? I would say it's a good range toy, a possible varmint gun, and a good learning tool, as they are very low recoil and easy for new users to shoot. But really, I think capacity is the real issue as to why I would not choose a Hi-Point for real home defense use. Just as a side note for anyone who is wondering why the carbines only have a single stack magazine, is that they were designed in the mid-90s specifically to be legal under one of those assault weapons bans which limited magazines to only 10 rounds. Unfortunately, that has hobbled the gun a bit in the years since that ban expired. So, those were all the problems that we saw in the video. Let's go back through the list and I will give you my conclusions. Number 1, feeding problems. Yes, this is a problem, and not all Hi-Points will run well out of the box, though some do. It's something you should be aware of before purchasing. If that's a deal breaker for you, okay, deal broke. Number 2, we found that the striker ejector has broken. Is this a problem? Yes. The striker ejector should be expected to last much, much longer than 100 rounds. This is no good. Number 3, the extractor is broken. The extractor was not broken. He either misspoke, which is easy to do, or he misunderstood what was going on inside the gun. The extractor, as far as we can tell from the video, was working perfectly fine. Number 4, the front sight is broken. As far as we can see from the video, the front sight was not broken, but has instead come loose. Yes, the screws on this part should be Loctited. Number 5, the gun flexes. This is probably true. Can I get mine to flex enough that I can see it? No. But my arms are also made out of pasta noodles. Number 6, the charging handle comes loose. Yes, it does, and it also requires some Loctite. Number 7, the gun randomly locks open. This is not true. We can see clearly that the user engaged the bolt hold open both times. This is user error. Number 8, some of the Picatinny rail broke because it's plastic. That is probably true because it's plastic. To summarize, the only thing that we can see for sure that broke on the gun were the striker, which is bad, and a small piece of Picatinny rail, which is also not great. The video leaves the impression that the gun is flying to pieces, and I don't believe that that is quite accurate or fair. Now, I'm positive that I'm going to get a bunch of rage comments criticizing me for being a Hi-Point shill or fanboy or whatever. Now, Hi-Point has never paid me a dime, and I am very honest about the problems I've had with my own Hi-Points. I just want this gun to be treated fairly as I would want for any gun. Look at it this way. What if this had been an AR-15 that was being reviewed and something on it broke, like a cam pin, for example? Mr. Thumb, due to his high level of expertise on the inner workings of the AR-15, would have been able to diagnose the problem very quickly. He would have explained to the camera that the cam pin broke, they call it a day, you get it fixed, and then come back another day to try it again. What I think would not have happened is that he would have continued to keep trying to use the broken gun over and over again, and heaping garbage on it the whole time. I mean, does that scenario seem likely to you? Was he right to be frustrated and annoyed? Oh yes, I have been too with my own Hi-Points. I mean, is it a pain that some new Hi-Points don't run so great out of the box? Yes. Should that firing pin have broken as it did? No. But there was a point in the video where Mr. Thumb talks very seriously about doing a thorough review and not just firing it a few times and saying it's great, as some people are known to do. I absolutely agree with him, and I also do not doubt his sincerity in this. However, within just a few minutes of having said that, he demonstrates that he doesn't know how the gun works and thinks that the gun is broken because of it. I do not mean to be overly critical, but in all honesty, I believe we can admit that some mistakes were made here. What I really hope is that he has a long talk with the Hi-Point people and they explain everything that happened, and hopefully he can revisit it at a later time. And just leaving a review like this, it doesn't really sit well with me because it feels a bit unfair. Also, something that really caught my attention in the video that I did not like was that twice he describes the design of the carbine as negligent. That is worrisome for a couple of reasons. First, some of the things that he's referring to as negligently designed are due to his own misunderstandings. Second, and more importantly, the word negligent carries with it serious legal connotations. It seems obvious to me that when he says this, he has allowed his frustration to get the better of him. But still, I think that was a very inadvisable thing to say. But with that said, even if the gun were not having feeding problems and the striker had not broken, it's still entirely possible that he would have hated the gun, and it's still possible that it would have been the worst gun he ever shot. But throwing out the word negligent, I think that was a bad idea. I mean, if you don't like the way the gun is designed, that's fine. It is not frontline, high-speed, low-drag, hardcore military operator-grade equipment. It is for recreational civilian use. And you can dislike it for that reason. I am not here to make anyone buy or like anything. I'm just interested in a little fairness. Now, if you've made it this far, I hope you will go and watch the Garand Thumb video, link in the description, and see if you can see the same things that I have seen in it. I doubt greatly that Mr. Thumb would ever see this video from my piddly little nowhere nobody channel, but if he does, please sir, take no offense, we all make mistakes. But I hope you can take a few minutes to go back and look at your video now and see if maybe there might be anything that you might have done differently. Anyway, that's all I got. Thanks. Stay safe. Have fun, kids.